You know, these sim drivers, they're so quick. You know, it's very interesting to see them drive because they have no real experience of a car.
Max Verstappen is the current Formula One world champion. He's currently the hottest property in F1. No disrespect to Lewis Hamilton and the other all-time greats, he's just crushing it on the track as the new season gets underway. Interestingly, Max isn't just a killer on the racetrack, he's just as deadly off the track. According to unofficial sources, Max is actually one of the top sim drivers in the world today. And as far as being able to combine dominance on the actual racetrack and the simulator track goes, it's pretty unprecedented to see one man do both at the same time. Being a professional sim driver is a daunting task on its own. You've got people dedicating their whole lives to it. Now, how exactly is Max able to do this while also being a beast on the tracks? Well, we'll break things down in this video, so sit back, relax, and get ready to take it all in. But first, see how quickly you can hit the like and subscribe buttons. We appreciate you, the racing fans, the most. Thank you so much. Now, right into Max's expertise in sim racing. While he's not killing things on a track or engaging in much drama surrounding Formula One, Max has been known to try his hand at sim racing. And so far, he's incredibly good at it. Now, there's no doubt that sim racing can only go so far as replicating the actual circuit in Formula One. However, even with the entire simulated experience, there's no doubt that Max is absolutely crushing it. As part of his work with Team Redline, he's raced some of the most impressive sim races in the world. These include notable esports drivers James Baldwin, Formula One driver Roman Grosjean, and even Formula 2 champion Felipe Drogovic. So I think it's safe to say this guy isn't one to joke with on the sim. So you might be wondering why this isn't much of a surprise. After all, Max gets to enjoy the actual race environment, so it should be pretty easy for him to transition and apply his skills in a sim racing. However, this isn't necessarily the case. Yes, the environment in sim racing and Formula 1 are pretty similar. However, there's also a reason why it's called a simulation. Sim racing can only do so much to imitate the natural racing environment, and there are bound to be some differences somewhere, especially when it comes to the final few tenths of lap times. Many drivers will tell stories of struggling in sim racing, trying to adapt to the environment. One of the significant differences between sim racing and the real thing is that sim racing doesn't necessarily give you that sensory advantage. For most Formula 1 drivers, being in the thick of the action provides an opportunity to really be at one with the car and rely on your senses. For instance, drivers get to feel the G-force, hear as other drivers get closer and adapt, and develop 3D perception and situational awareness. While sim racing tries to mimic the real thing, it doesn't necessarily provide that same feeling. Drivers would need to adjust from hearing the actual sounds of opposing cars to feeling it with the in-game audio, which, as we all know, is different. They also have to adapt to playing with a two-dimension screen instead of the 3D action they get with the natural racing environment. Even if they use virtual reality screens to bring that 3D perception, getting used to that can also come with its own challenges. All of this is to say that for most professional drivers who have grown accustomed to the real thing, transitioning to sim racing isn't as seamless as you might think. Sim racing requires a different set of skills and techniques than the real world, all of which can make it more challenging. With his killer mentality, Max has a few tricks that seem to be helping him out whenever he enters the sim racing booth. For instance, he has developed a keen sense of listening whilst he's sim racing. He especially listens to the tyres, allowing him to know when they're close to their limits. It's much different from the real world, where drivers can easily feel the tyres and know they're almost maxed out. See what we did there? By listening carefully, Max is able to know when his tyres are stretched out and would need to be changed. Interestingly enough, many of the top sim drivers have actually learned this trick and can apply it when they drive. They can drive in the sim and rely on fewer senses, instead choosing to simply listen to their car and communicate with it whenever it feels like it's topping out. The ability to rely on fewer senses is why several sim drivers could actually succeed if they are put in real cars. But of course, as we've said earlier, it doesn't always work out because both situations aren't exactly the same. Max's impressive ability also comes from the fact that he tends to drive in sim racing just as he drives in the real world. It's no news that Max Verstappen is one of the most aggressive and intense drivers in Formula 1. Interestingly, he brings that same level of aggression into the sim racing whenever he's on the virtual circuit. He throws dive bombs, forces other drivers to back out, and even sets impressive traps that force them to evade him as they move. Max takes his affinity for risks into the virtual environment as well. He's known for never leaving any margin on the track and going for bold overtaking manoeuvres whenever he can, even if it annoys the other drivers time and time again. But hey, as long as it gets the job done, we can all say it's part of the game. The same affinity is what he deploys in his sim racing. Of course, this hasn't always worked out for Max. At the Le Mans Virtual 2022, he got caught out after taking too much curb at the 4 chicanes. The weirdest thing was that this happened while the game suffered a massive glitch. When it was all said and done, Max's virtual car bounced, throwing him into the barrier. Just as well, while racing at the Spa 6R, Max, who was in an LMP2 car, was trying to overtake a GT around an incredibly tight bend. He noticed the GT slowing down at the bend and immediately tried to go around it. The move proved too risky, especially since the GT was able to overcome the bend quickly and pick up speed before him. Being the ever-competitive guy he is, Max forced the GT to take an unusual line. The latter understeered slightly, instead colliding with Max's car's rear end. And just like that, Max's car was sent hurtling into the barrier. Sure, Max's tricks can sometimes be controversial. We all remember the many times he's been given penalties or opposing teams have called for reviews of his actions. But as the guys over at Red Bull Racing would say, it's all part of the game. And say what you will, Max definitely gets it done at both ends. It's one of the hallmarks of great drivers, to be honest. They know how to push the rules right up to the limit without necessarily tipping over. And for a driver as great as Max, it's easy to see how well this has worked for him. So Max takes the same mentality he applies to real racing and uses it while on the virtual racing track. However, as we now know, the environment isn't necessarily the same. Max's advantage comes from his uncanny ability to adapt to whichever environment he's in, and to do it relatively quickly. We see this play out perfectly in Max's car preference itself. In the real world, Max has pretty much always been a Red Bull guy. He's made his name with the brand and seems set on being their marquee guy for years to come. But he isn't even racing a virtual Red Bull car when he's in sim racing. He's driven almost everything in the sim racing scene, from GTs to LMP2 and even F3 cars. All of these vehicles require their own level of skill, and each racer will need to adapt to them differently. From driving styles to steering compartments and more, racers need to be able to properly adapt if they hope to have any success. Take the GT for example. These cars are comparatively heavier than others, with less downforce and features like ABS and traction control. It goes without saying that you can't drive such a car the way you drive a Formula 1 car. For instance, when it comes to a car with a lot of downforce, you tend to brake very quickly and hard when you enter the braking zone. Then, as the downforce comes off the car, you quickly trail off the brakes. For a GT, you don't have to apply all of your pressure while braking. This is because of the ABS, which provides some of the much needed braking assistance. The driving style is just so different here. Regardless, Max shows zero problems doing just that. Whichever car he's in, he's been able to properly adapt and ensure that he comes out on top. Max himself understands this. In an interview with the Washington Post, he said, "The main thing is that on all the simulator platforms, I race non-Formula 1 cars. So you have to be adaptive and change your driving style since every car demands something else as far as steering output, throttle and driving lines. I'm constantly learning and adapting to what I need to do in each car to go as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, that helps when you go back to Formula 1 because you have all of this experience in the back of your mind." Max has also credited his time in the sim track to helping him become a much better driver in the real world, saying, "Sometimes you might not be entirely happy with the setup of your Formula 1 car, but you can draw on all of your different experiences in the simulator." And when asked if all of this is helping him become an all-rounded driver, he simply claimed that this is what he's trying to achieve. Combine Max's aggressiveness with an understanding of his car and an ability to quickly adapt to whichever vehicle he's in, and you'd find that Max is a pretty dangerous man to meet on the track in any sim race. In conclusion, Max Verstappen's success in both Formula 1 and sim racing can be attributed to his aggressive racing style, keen listening skills and exceptional adaptability. His ability to excel in both environments showcases his versatility as a driver and makes him a force to be reckoned with on and off the track. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed learning about Max Verstappen's sim racing prowess, be sure to like, comment and subscribe for more great content like this. Until then, this has been F1 Racing Now, your inside track to all things F1. See you in the next one, racing fans.